Well, the federal government is targeting 6.3% rate, 7% economic growth, and 0.3% poverty rate by 2050. This was disclosed by the Minister of Budget and National Planning, Clem Agba, during the pre-national economic summit press conference held in Abuja on Wednesday. Agba said the Nigeria Agenda 2050, which was developed by the current administration, was designed to transform the country into an upper middle income developing country with a per capita income of $33,000. On the other hand, he said the National Development Plan 2021 to 2025 had the vision to unlock the potential of the country in all sectors of the economy for a sustainable, holistic and inclusive national development. He said the Nigeria Agenda 2050 would be implemented through a series of medium-term plans and annual budgets. Well, to further discuss this, we have joining us Sheson Okwade, Chairman, ICANN Ikeja District Society of ICANN. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Okwade.
Good morning, Bola, and good morning to all our viewers connected this morning.
Good to have you on the show. Well, let's start by looking at the previous plan. This plan, of course, succeeds the Vision 2020 introduced in 2009 and the Economic Recovery and Growth Plan, ERGP, introduced in 2017, both of which expired in 2020. And the NDP is also a bridge for the country's long-term plan currently being developed, and that is Nigeria's Agenda 2050. I think we should start by rating or assessing the performance of the previous Vision 2020 and the Economic Recovery Growth Plan before we move on to this new NDP. Of course, not relatively new because it started in 2021 last year. Mr. Okwade.
Thank you very much, Bola. If you permit me to start on this note that majority of the problem we have is not fantastic policies or agenda. Our problem has always been implementation, and we always ask ourselves the question, is it that we put some of these things together without having a deep thought of the future that the area we are projecting to have. When you look at Vision 2020 and the ERGP, it's a very fantastic policy with a great milestone, thinking that by now we should be talking like the advanced country with some of those things that we haven't there. But if you look back, majority of the highlighted plans in it has not come to reality, and we've discovered that government might attribute some of those problems to COVID-19 that we faced between 2020 and now, that distorted and disrupt a lot of activity. But you look at it that majority of the promises they give in terms of lifting people out of poverty, improving the educational sector, improving the health sector, has not come to reality. And each time you see some of these documents come to play, you see very beautiful, very optimistic. But when it comes to actualization, it becomes a serious discussion that up till now gives so much worries, whether average people that lead this country have the sympathy of the masses that they claim they are leading.
So what's the point? Is it just about putting pen to paper and to be seen as working? Because if you haven't assessed and come up with the results you got from the previous plan, the Vision 2020, the ERGP, why move on to another plan? All right, Sheson Okwade there talking to us about the National Development Plan of this administration, which is supposed to run from 2021 to 2025. And of course, they have a lot of projections talking about economic diversification, talking about security, and several projections. But how feasible or realistic are all of these projections looking at the current realities in the country? And Sheson Okwade is helping us break this down so that we can see the prospect of all of these projections, as we see that this is not the first time the federal government will be coming up with policies, plans, projections to boost the economy. We've seen that of the Vision 2020, and as he just said, we've not really achieved so much with that, and as well as the ERGP. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you very much, Abola. There seems to be a little technical glitches there.
So sorry for that.
Oh, okay, so if I go about the other areas when you talk about the economic diversification, the investment, infrastructure, security, which are the key indices for this administration, let's pick them one after the other. Our major source of revenue, economic-wise, has been oil, and when this administration was coming in, the promise to divert into agriculture, into other mineral resources like gold mining. But we've had a lot of challenges in the aspect that we had more of illegal acts on this thing than we had the legal one to come out with. So the challenge we have is that what is the monitoring mechanism that the government is putting in place to make sure that some of those other arms of government, arms of resources that can generate in revenue for them are being monitored closely in such a way that they get the best out of it. Investment in infrastructure, fine. They've been able to hide the gain, but you discover that insecurity has threatened a lot of this thing. In terms of good governance, people have actually lost trust and confidence because a lot of people have actually been debt into poverty rather than being lifted out of poverty. When you pick education and health sector, the leaders themselves have not been able to show good example in the aspect that majority of their children is always on social media, graduating outside this country rather than them having that same thing with us. And health-wise, the infrastructure has gone down, and majority of them travels to have their health care rather than staying back to have some of these things. So when you look at all those parameters in place that the government has set out for an average citizen to enjoy, we have not seen the best of it, but we feel that they can be intentional about making sure that some of those things that they have given as promises to Nigeria are actually being carried out so that we can have a good thing. We have the resources, we have the human capital. I think all we need is leaders that can give good coordination to this that we have, and we can be better off for it.
Indeed. Well, as I said, some of these things that they've raised, some of the indices have been the buzzword of this administration, for instance, economic diversification. But how serious have we been in achieving it? Well, the federal government is targeting 6.3% rate and 7% economic growth, as well as 0.3% poverty rate by 2050. How feasible is this?
Yeah, the visibility for me, it's not just there because they will tell you that the starting point determines the end. And if by now that we started, I'm sure we have Vision 2021 to 2025, which is the ERGP that is expected to be the lead way to the Vision 2050. So you discover that most of the time it's more projection that is not realistic because the government feels to be intentional in making sure. And it's not far-fetched. If you give this kind of promise, we should have mechanisms that when you fail, there are punishments. We've seen in same crime where people who actually handle the aim of affair, when they fail, they honorably resign, or some of them even go to jail for deceiving, because it's an act of deceit. You have eyed the hope of every individual, and suddenly reverse of the case that they are going to do. So there should be punishment for that. Because if you promise something, like with Trust D, he gave it, and within 45 days, all the things he felt was just on the tip of her finger, was not just achievable. And she threw in the towel and said, sorry, I just have to step down because things that are, but it's not obtainable in this part of the world. And it's an area we should give due consideration to if we must move forward. When you give your word is your bound. And when you fail to implement it, there should be consequence for such failure.
Well, it leaves to be, there's still the question of who would enforce that punishment. But the NDP has a funding target of 348.1 trillion naira. And that is government, paying 49.7 trillion, and then private sector generating 298.3 trillion naira. And it's expected to generate 21 million full-time jobs, lift 35 million people out of poverty by 2025. What are your thoughts on all of this?
Very sound pessimistic, not realistic to me. If you're saying by 2025 you're going to lift about 35 million people out of poverty, we should start seeing the traces now. The insecurity is bedeviling us that an average person who should create employment are not just available to do that. So many people, businesses are moved from one place to the other. Several people cannot travel. I listened to a friend this morning when he was giving an analysis that is scary for him. They even travel between here and Ibadan, knowing fully well the insecurity that is pervading on the road. That's a major highway. So if you are not addressing insecurity, how do you expect the companies to come into the country, set up factories or businesses through FDI for them to get people employed? So for me, it seems more of a book activity than rather the reality. Creating 21 million full-time jobs. Is it in the private sector that is struggling to meet its operating costs? The cost of diesel as we speak. Well, the power generation is not just there. So how do you expect the private sector to come to bear with some of these things that we're talking about? Or the government themselves that are struggling. A lot of state governors, as we speak, are owing a lot of salaries to individuals, struggling to make ends meet. So you look that the future is bleak with some that they put in place, because we cannot see the structure, that structure that dictates that in the nearest 1 to 3 years since we take a new lead. Like I said the other time, we are able to invest in infrastructure, but how many of such infrastructure is being put to use?
Well, the plan for, of course, the NDP is meant to drastically bring poverty rate to 0.6% and unemployment rate to 6.3%, while transiting the economy to the highest per capita GDP of the group of upper middle income economies. Well, as of 2018, Nigeria's poverty rate stood at 92%, while unemployment rate is currently at over 33%. And with this projection, it means that within the next 3 years, poverty rate will drop from 92% to 0.6%, and then unemployment from 6.3% to 6.3% from 33%. Do you see this achievable? Olusegun, can you hear me? Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah. I saw you discussing about saying something about the
poverty rate and the unemployment rate.
And I'm sure if you can see me on the other side, I was laughing. Reducing from 92% to about 0.6% for poverty level is not acceptable as we speak. Within 3 years, what is the achievement in the last 7 years compared to what we are expected to see in the next 3 years? We are not sounding pessimistic, but we have not seen the roadmap that will give us the assurance. Businesses are leaving the shore of the country every day, and we claim there is ease of doing business. That is questionable on its own. And if you don't create the enabling environment,
all right,
create the employment that is needed.
Okay, I think we'll just leave it there. It looks like we're having a little bit of glitches here and there. But thank you so much for your time on the show, Olusegun Kwadi, Chairman, Ikeja District Society of ICANN.
Thank you very much, Obolane, and the best of the day to all our viewers. And happy weekend.
Have a great weekend too. All right, we'll take a break. When we'll come back, we will be delving into the global oil sector.